Hi, it's me, Alma from Monster Hunter Wild. I want to talk to you about the Dapperwing. In seriousness, I'm an ornithology researcher. I study birds, dinosaurs, and I do a little bit of work on fossil fish as well. And I also really love Monster Hunter, which I'm sure you can't tell by my outfit. This is the Dapperwing. It's a small, arboreal flying animal from the Scarlet Forest. One thing that is really confusing to me about the Dapperwing is where exactly it fits in the Tree of Life. The game manual doesn't explicitly call it a bird, and that surprised me for a second because it looked so bird-like, but upon closer examination, you can notice that it has a pair of little teeny tiny fangs that poke out from under its lip. Additionally, when Dapperwings do their mating dance, you can see that unlike a bird, which usually just have alular claws, the Dapperwings have 3 digits that are separate and incorporated into their wing. This starts to get really interesting and a little confusing, because the Dapperwings do have feathers and they do look a lot like birds in terms of other parts of their anatomy. Fortunately for classification, this actually doesn't break any rules. Feathers are way, way older than birds. Some people even speculate that feathers are older than modern crocodilians, and that modern crocodilians evolved scales after descending from a feathered ancestor. I don't know if I would consider myself that radical, but what I do believe is that dinosaurs and pterosaurs definitely shared a feathered ancestor, because both dinosaurs and pterosaurs have feathers. We know for certain that the Dapperwing isn't a pterosaur because it has multiple digits incorporated into its wing membrane. Pterosaur wings are only suspended by 1 digit. The Dapperwing also lacks a pteroid bone and has this long, stiff tail. And there's one specific group of animals that I think of when I think of something with a long, stiff tail and feathers. The Silurisaurians. If you take a look at some of the most well-known Silurisaurians, you'll see some very large, familiar faces. But what unites this group of mostly predatory dinosaurs is not their size, but the structures that hold their tails straight so they can use them as a rudder and a counterbalance. It's important to note that birds are also Silurisaurians. So this classification alone does not exclude the Dapperwing from being a bird. What does is the teeth in its jaw, which keep it out of aves proper, because none of the true birds have teeth. Additionally, none of the true birds fly with membranes in the way that the Dapperwing does. They all fly with fused hand bones that have feathers attached to them. So we're limited to looking at groups of animals that have these big pennaceous feathers, stiff tails, but also membrane-powered flight that incorporates multiple digits. And because I'm a person who spends a normal amount of time thinking about the taxonomy of extinct animals, my mind jumped to Scansoriopterigidae. Scansoriopterigids are this super unique group of theropod dinosaurs that have both broad, pennaceous display feathers and also membrane-powered wings that incorporate multiple digits. As you can see on this friendly little fella here, Yi Qi, they also have teeth. So yeah, that's our pretty definitive taxonomic position for the Dapperwing, or as I've chosen to name it, Pseudochiropterus magnificens, which means magnificent false bat, because the tufts of feathers on its head kind of look like the ears of a bat. Obviously, the elephant in the room about Dapperwings is their molts, which makes sense because they're a animal living in a highly productive environment that's also very predator-rich. So just like a lot of equatorial animals, they can afford to engage in these bizarre, really extravagant display features that help them score mates, but they also need to worry about protecting themselves from predators. What that means is that individuals that adopt a more muted or cryptic coloration outside of the breeding season will be most successful, and that's pretty universal. However, even during the breeding season, there's a lot of variation in coloration. And this is because, even while they're dancing, these big, super brightly colored guys are going to get eaten at a higher rate, even if they also breed at a higher rate. So there's this sort of equilibrium between the different colors that Dapperwing plumage can take on. Because in evolution, fitness is measured not by actual ability to survive, but more so based on reproductive success, animals that breed once a lot and then die quickly at the end of the season still will pass on their genes a lot. A dull-colored male that breeds 10 times over the course of his entire life, but manages to survive 10 consecutive breeding seasons, is going to be the same amount of successful as a brightly colored male that breeds 10 times on the first day of the breeding season and then gets snapped up by a Rathalos the day after. Speaking of Rathalos, I have here a list of the plausible predators for Dapperwings. Because they're selecting for cryptic coloration so much, I assumed that they were probably being targeted by things that use their sight to hunt, but they also get eaten by the fly traps in the Scarlet Forest. Additionally, I think some pretty prominent predators of the Dapperwings would be Pyragils, Yonkutku, potentially if they're young, and Vespoids. probably a lot of the younger large monsters would go after them as well, like a fledgling Rathalos going after its first meal, because they're quite small, but they would make a good meal for a young flying wyvern. Speaking of the mating again, when Dapperwings do mate, males establish their own territory, which contrasts how they usually live close together throughout most of the year. They find their own little log. They start doing this little dance that I've illustrated on the bottom here. Sometimes the female will return the dance. If they do, then they'll mutually groom each other. They'll like preen each other's feathers, and then they will make offspring. One thing that separates the Dapperwings from the other members of Scansoriopterigidae is their zygodactyl feet. Pretty much all the other Scansoriopterigids have what are called anisodactyl feet, where this first digit is forward instead of backward. But these guys have it rotated all the way around, probably to grip branches better. Here is a closer look at the skull anatomy. I will upload a scan of this at some point so that people can read through this whole thing in greater detail. But for now, that's what it is. Please let me know what other creatures from Monster Hunter you'd love to see. I'm trying to get to everybody's suggestions, but there are so many now because this series is kind of blowing up. And for that, I thank each and every one of you so much. Please check me out on YouTube if you want to see all the videos I've made, as well as on here. And also, I'll be live a lot of the time, so you can watch me on there as well.